Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of the TES Leading and Learning webinar series and our first episode for 2024. I'm Paul, I'm host of the New P&L podcast and I'm founder of the New P&L Institute. And I've been invited by TES to lead this fantastic 10-part webinar series where we focus on inspiration and innovations and intelligence for senior leaders right across the education sector. And indeed all of those who want to develop their leadership skills and help to transform their organization. In this episode, we're speaking with Rama Gheerawo. Rama is director at the Helen Hamlin Centre for Design. And he's also a fellow of both the Royal College of Art and the Royal Society of Arts. And he is the author of Creative Leadership, Born from Design, which will form the basis of much of our conversation with Rama today. So Rama, a very warm welcome to the TES Leading and Learning Seminar. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
It's a great pleasure to be here, color coordinated as we are.
So we're here today to discuss your fantastic book, Creative Leadership, and its relevance for all of those in the education sector, leaders and senior managers, and indeed for all educational leaders right across all organizations. So to set some context for the conversation today, what defines creative leadership for you? And given we're specifically speaking to an audience in the education sector, how do you think it applies to leaders in the sector?
So there were many starting points for creative leadership. Thinking back to 2007, one of the most powerful ones was that we need creatives in leadership position. But then that evolved to being, any leader needs to be creative. Mm-hmm. And where you taught about leadership. So those two things really came together. Creativity is often talked about in leadership, but is missing. And we need to democratize where we are taught about leadership. And I think it goes right the way back through the school system, through the education system.
Yes. I know, I often see it myself. I work in a leadership capacity through the New P&L podcast and through my own leadership consultancy. And I often think that there's sort of one thing as we move through our career and towards leadership in some capacity, whether that's head of an organization or whether we manage a team in a department. And many teachers will be the same as you come in as a geography teacher or a history teacher, and you might end up as a principal. Yet the one thing we never really learn formally or as much as we should is how to be that leader, not just a manager, but a leader. And I wondered, how do you start that process? Where should the process start in terms of leadership development, not just professional evolution development?
We're not getting everyone having an opportunity to lead, and we're not seeking talent in the right place. We're not allowing those empaths to come forward, those thoughtful people, those who are female or non-binary, those who are younger or older, and those of color. So there are many people out there that haven't been evolved into their full leadership capability. And even more so, we are told that leadership only comes from a certain type. People are demanding, we ran a workshop with 120 people from 34 different countries and regions in 2021.
Yes.
And I asked them, what do you want from leadership? Number one was active listening. Number two was empathy. Number three was diversity. No one said budget management, people management, filling in forms. That's management, which is an important component. But leadership was aiming towards two things, trust and authenticity. So that's what I hope the book is about. It's even got a circle on it, kind of representing circles of trust, circles of authenticity.
When we think about creativity as a concept, it's very interpretive, and everyone has a different view of what creative leadership looks like and what creativity looks like. So when you talk about creative leadership, what are the principles, just for the audience listening, what are the principles that define it when they stop listening to this webinar, when they go out and think about how they implement creative leadership in their own world, in their own professional development? What are the principles that underpin creative leadership from your perspective?
So there are three values that are part of creative leadership. The first is empathy. The next is creativity. And the third, which sort of forms, a tripod really, is clarity.
Yes.
So empathy, creativity, and clarity. And those are open to everyone. That's what I wanted with this model was it was really asking the question, is there something for everyone, regardless of where they are in their education journey, that they can tap into? And even 5-year-olds, even 2-year-olds know quite a lot about empathy.
Yes.
And sometimes I wonder if it's educated out of us. But the issue here is that each of these values by themselves is not enough. If you only have empathy, you may be a pushover, or the dangers of over empathy, over kindness, over compassion is out there.
Yes.
If you only have creativity, you may be a bicycle with pedals but no chain, pedaling hard but kind of getting nowhere. And we've seen lots of creative practice where it's just innovate, innovate, innovate. But what are we doing this for, and why are we doing this? And then finally, clarity, the most understudied principle. That's if you only have clarity, you could be some kind of dictatorial principal or head of department. Dictators are very clear about what they're doing, but often have no empathy. So a simple way of thinking about this is empathy is the heart, clarity is the head, and creativity is the hand. So you need head, heart, hand in order to act and in order to be a holistic human being.
Yes. It's a great example, a great definition. And when you look to the business sector or the public sector, indeed, where do you see practical examples of great creative leadership in action? For our audience who are listening, and when they think about what it looks like, what can they picture in terms of great creative leadership? Where do you see it out there in the world?
It's looking at leaders where those three values are balanced, where they have empathic clarity or clear creativity or creative empathy. It's that mixture where the magic happens. So in the business world, people like Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, talks about clarity being the most understudied but needed leadership principle.
Yeah, I agree.
People like Indra Nooyi, who was Indian female head of PepsiCo. Whether you agree with Pepsi or not, she said things like, I wouldn't ask anyone to do anything I wouldn't do myself. And when you look at Chobani Yogurt, their CEO, for example, he talked about a line from Rumi. How does creativity happen? How do you manage a creative company? And the Rumi quote he talks about is, as you step foot on the way appears. So I've given you a group of things, a group of examples around CEOs, but the most powerful examples are those around us.
Yes.
It's the post person, going that extra mile. It's the smile from a stranger. It's the healthcare practitioner who is actually looking at your health rather than prescription and wants you to get back to your life. It could be your child. People often quote what they learn from their children. So that's the beauty of creative leadership, is we're not just looking at CEOs and Greta Thunberg or Gandhi. We also look at ourselves and we also look at those around us. That's where creative leadership lives.
So when we think about the creative aspect of that trifecta, that tripod that you identified earlier, often creativity takes time. It requires time away in space to think and breathe and allow yourself to join the dots in the back of your mind when you're facing a problem, for example. Time is something that we all struggle with at the moment, but perhaps no more so than education sector leaders who are stretched in multiple directions with very limited resources today. So what is your advice to these leaders within the education sector about how they find or accommodate that lack of, or perceived lack of, time to be creative, for want of a better phrase? Is there a hack towards the creative element of the trifecta?
Yes. Yes and no. As ever, I'm giving a slightly mystical answer, but creativity never runs out. So that's the good news.
Yeah.
In the book, we identify 8 factors that are barriers to creativity. Things like risk, things like mindset. We tried creativity, back in 1985 and it didn't work.
Yes.
What is creativity? How do we use it? How do you lean into it? So I think there's a whole system of education around what creativity is.
Yes.
That we need to learn. And this is what we do in our workshops. So I think the most creative group of people are the people you have in the room. We've done we've done a lot of work with head teachers and actually school leaders, looking at what the issues are, and time comes up. Time is one of those barriers, by the way.
Yeah.
Alongside bureaucracy and budget and other things. But the interesting thing with time is, one of the greatest gaps in our life is that gap between what we want to happen and when we think it should happen, and what actually happens and when it actually does. And that gap is massive.
Yeah.
And it's so pronounced in education. When you start to look at the challenges teachers and head teachers and educators are under in terms of frameworks and filling things in, and things like Ofsted visits.
Yes.
How do you measure creativity in those frameworks? And you can throw that across the business sector, across education, in general, higher education included. How is creativity celebrated? How is doing something different recognized?
You talk in the book about creative leadership and being underpinned by what you've called open source leadership, and that's effectively a collective group deconstructing and reconstructing a framework or whatever it happens to be. In doing this, so how do you ensure that a leader comes back to the clarity point? How does a leader ensure that this process of open source doesn't lead to, I guess, inertia over collective decision making? How do you strike the balance?
So I'm going to jump back into the design studio here for a moment. A lot of times when designers go out and talk to people about, say, we're designing a new ticketing system for the railways. And then you go out and you talk to people, what do they want? And you'll hear many different things from many people. At the end of empathy, there is clarity. So you'll have empathy with a lot of people. I may have the favorite 82-year-old that I spoke to, but actually what he or she said or they said wasn't actually relevant to this project. So bank it for another project, but you have to be like an editor. You have to edit the movie.
Yes.
And you may need to leave some of your favorite quotes and comments and sayings and insights on the cutting room floor.
Yes.
So clarity is what you need to bring in at this point in order to curate. And never forget that at the end of the day, one of the roles of the leader is to empathically listen to people, but then to creatively curate that conversation with clarity and to give a direction or to tease a direction from the group. And if there isn't a direction forthcoming, facilitate that.
Yes.
But make sure that everyone is heard, but not everyone might be on board with the direction. And a simple challenging thing here that comes from level 5 leadership, which I do mention in the book, but was very much a sort of inspiration framework, which talked about professional strength and intense humility being qualities of a leader. They said that the professional strength bit was sometimes if in the collective there are people who time and time again are not going with the flow and not kind of understanding that group decision and maybe always swimming against the grain, that then warrants a conversation to understand why, and it may require further action on rare occasion. So I think that's where clarity can come in and help.
Yes. Sometimes if you want to move towards creative leadership, you might be a teacher listening to this or an education leader, for example, And as you cited earlier, that there are steps to this process, the many P's, I think it was purpose and process and so on, to move towards this framework. Sometimes it can seem like quite a formidable thing to work through. And I wondered, from your perspective, when it comes to creative leadership, whether there's any value to working backwards. So looking at it from an individual perspective and what creative leadership looks like in 5 years' time, what its legacy is, if you like, and then working back from there to start and achieve the process today. Is there any value to that legacy looking?
Great question. Never been asked that before. So 5 years from now and looking backwards, I think in the education system, and this is one of the areas we really want to work in. So would love to hear how this lands with educators that might be listening to the podcast. It's incredibly important that I think these three values are brought into teaching, into the education system. And in 5 years' time, I would love to see it as part of curricula.
Yes.
So I'm just putting that out there. It's something we're working towards.
Yep.
And curricula may be a very strict word, but how do you engender the natural leadership that or connectivity that comes into 5-year-olds? 5-year-olds don't do what we do in academia, which is argue relentlessly. They may ask lots of questions like why, but they don't rip down one thing in order to put another thing up. And people argue, is it empathy? Is it compassion? Is it kindness? Is it, is it pity? Is it sympathy? And I think all of those are useful connectors at different points.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't stay there. You need to move towards connected kindness. And that's what we're aiming for. So in 5 years' time, that's what I hope to see, is that we are teaching and living and breathing this a little more within the education system. But like a plane has a fuselage, if it's empathy, it needs two wings, which are clarity and creativity. So how are these things brought into the education system? And I think it's summed up by a football club who have a training and teaching academy. And the person who was head of it didn't really like football. They were a teacher that was brought in, and they said, and this is a Premier League club, can't mention the name, but they said to us, we create the world's best footballers. Do we create the world's best human beings? And can creative leadership help our 10, 11, and 12-year-olds embed those principles into themselves so that on the pitch and off the pitch, they they are generous, capable, and kind human beings who deploy that. And this was about 10 years ago, and it was coming at a time when footballers were in the news for a lot of challenging behaviors, shall we say, off the pitch. So that question of, are we creating the most well-rounded human beings? So in 5 years' time, I would want to say yes. I would want to say this is a module, this is a framework, these are tools that teachers can believe in, that they've tried out themselves and they can take into the classroom. And it's not inflicted on them, it's self-generated. They can mold their characteristics around it. And if we are to achieve that in 5 years' time, we need to start today. And we are. we are starting with a pilot project for teachers. We are focusing on schools. We've got a little bit of pump prime funding, but we're looking for schools starting off in the UK to work with us to develop those creative leadership principles.
And we all know that language defines the way we think and the way we frame our thinking. So what language defines the creative leader? What is the lexicon of the creative leader?
Words should be carefully measured so they carry intent. And in creative leadership, one of the phrases, I'm going to give two examples here, but one of the phrases we love to use is instead of the word I love you, which is often said to be the most important phrase in the English language, it's I see you. So think about who you haven't seen recently. Is it your partner? Is it your child? Is it your colleague in the school? Is it a 14-year-old with dyslexia who struggled all night to do an essay? And how do you say to them, I see you? And teachers hold this magic capability of saying to a student, I see you. But it goes beyond that. You know, thanking a colleague for support, thanking your team, or even a head teacher for protected leadership. I think, and then voicing it. So not just saying thank you to everyone like a thank you machine, but showing that in different ways, with a smile, with appreciation. The most silent colleagues in a staff meeting, inviting them to speak. The second example is called the cage of context, and this is in the book. So quite often we're locked into the cage of our own context. So I realized, if I was using myself as an example, that quite often I would find it difficult to break into a conversation. I am a self-confessed empath. I'm an introvert in a sort of extrovert role. And to break into a conversation, I would often say to bring in the point of view of a person of color. And then everyone not of color would look at their shoes, so you've immediately excluded. And what I realized is to step out of the cage of my own context, I could go in two directions. You could go personal. So you could say, I just wanted to present something from my experience or from what I've seen. And the universal way, because I was often coming in with the empathic point of view, as you might have guessed. So you would turn around and say, just to bring in something of kindness or empathy, or to present a sympathetic point of view. And the activator of that is language. So there's two examples of how language in a creative leadership format can bring you into a different space. We talked about Rumi earlier, so I'm just going to give a quote here that speaks to that. And I think this is what language does. So Rumi said, beyond ideas of right doing and wrongdoing, there is a field. I will meet you there. And the creative leadership application of language is about that. It's not about shying away from conflict or just looking at cohesion all the time. It's about creating a space where opinions and words are reflected and respected, and moving together into that field beyond right doing and wrongdoing. So much of our language is based in right and wrong. So much academic construct and teaching construct is kind of colonialist leftover as well. I'm right, you're wrong. I'm going to pour knowledge into your head. But Khalil Gibran says teaching is walking someone to the edges of their own knowledge, not ignorance, knowledge, opening a door and watching them walk through. And I think that's what I hope creative leadership can engender and support and bring the tools for. But most importantly, it's about language.
Rama, as we come to the end of the episode, we always ask our guests to summarize 3 concise and final pieces of actionable wisdom that education leaders can go away and practically deliver in their organization tomorrow. And we always use a variation of the TES acronym to identify this. So when it comes to creative leadership, T is for talk. And what is the most important thing that education leaders can do more effectively to communicate the principles of creative leadership within the school or the college or the educational establishment? What role can talking, communication play in delivering those principles?
It's living it. It's breathing it. It's being it. It's then when it comes out of you, when empathy literally shines from every body cell, but is tempered by clarity, deployed by creativity, people will notice.
Mm-hmm.
People always notice. You can't fool teachers. You can't fool educators. You can't fool children. You know, they say teachers have eyes in the back of their head. So do children.
Yes.
So you're working in an environment where your empathy matters. So show it and grow it, explore it and explode it. And what will happen there is you will shine the light that you need around you, and people will see it.
Yes. E is for excite. So when it comes to creative leadership, what's the most important thing that leaders can do within their organizations to help them better engage and embrace and believe in the value of creative leadership? How do we excite those around us?
So I have to start by saying bless teachers and what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that just because of my family or because I'm on this podcast. Teaching is one of the noblest professions, but one of the most difficult professions. And in order to excite, you need to fill the well that is yourself. Wear your passion and your purpose on your sleeve.
Mm-hmm.
But the advice here is a very simple piece of advice. Give of yourself, but don't give away yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So find those things that bring you everyday joy, whether it's a sunset, a greenery, a scenery, whether it's a favorite warm beverage, or just simply taking a moment to power down and thank the day at the end of each day, and power up, center yourself, stand in your truth, because then your emotion will come through and you will show genuine excitement to those around you, because your energy will be out there. It'll be like the sun.
I think the energy point is a really interesting point to make, actually, and I agree. S is for sustain. What's the one thing leaders can do to ensure they sustain a commitment to creative leadership over the medium term so it becomes a core component of an organization's thinking and culture?
Check in with yourself, and make sure you check in a positive as well as way of improvement.
Mm-hmm.
Very often we will say something negative about ourselves. Say 3 positive things, because you as educators and teachers will have done 3 positive things that day,
Yes.
even if it is to get yourself to work. So check in with yourself, but also check in with others, and maybe even find that person or those partners who you can grow together. So the concept of allyship is really important here.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be a lone boat. Be a rising tide together, because a rising tide lifts all boats.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way you sustain. It's connectivity, it's allyship, and it's growing together towards shared purpose and vision.
So I wanted to ask one final question on empathy, because empathetic leadership is something I'm doing an awful lot of thinking about myself over the last few months, and I wanted to get your authoritative take on this question, really. Often people will call themselves empathetic leaders, and I actually wonder whether that is possible to be an empathetic leader. We can certainly show compassion, we can certainly show a desire to understand and to want to learn and to appreciate nuance and context, but I wonder whether we can self-identify as an empathetic leader, or whether that empathy, that recognition of empathetic leadership, can only be bestowed upon us, can only be given by those that we demonstrate compassion and a desire and a requirement to understand or desire to learn. Because I wonder if we define ourselves as empathetic leaders, whether we lean too much on the title and the ego rather than on the commitment and a genuine compassion and empathy, a genuine commitment to it. So in your view, can we be an empathetic leader, or can it only be prescribed to us by those we were demonstrating compassion and understanding to?
I would advocate for growth rather than titling.
Yes.
to call oneself an empathic leader or an empathetic leader is probably a little bit of an antithesis.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's about growing it and showing it. But empathy, people think, is a soft skill. But leaders like Jacinda Ardern demonstrate that it's not.
Yes.
They show that it is at the heart of everything. And even books that challenge the word empathy say empathy is necessary for the construct of human society.
Absolutely.
It's necessary for the growth. So we're just leaning into one of the most human values that we have,
Mm-hmm.
around which society is built, but around which leadership is forgotten.
Yes.
So we're bringing it back into that space. And I would say to people, empathetic leader is one of the titles we looked at, but we called it creative leadership.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really the deployment of empathy is through creativity. And creativity is a little bit more measurable and descriptive.
Yes.
All of these three values, I would say, are aspirational. They are instigational.
Mm-hmm.
And let them live there. And, final words on this really is, in my life, I've heard so many people, including teachers at school and trainers, talk about leadership being power, being a boss, being Marlon Brando in The Godfather or Meryl Streep in The Devil Wears Prada, and equating it with power.
Yes.
But the Indian poet laureate Tagore said this short 4-line epigram, which describes the difference between, because the other word for empathy is love.
Yes.
And that's what I think we need to bring in. So Tagore said, power said to the world, you are mine. And she imprisoned him on her throne. Love said to the world, I am yours. And she gave him the freedom of her house. So you're not looking to be imprisoned on a cage of power.
Yes.
In a cage of power.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking to have freedom. And that's what we hope, that empathy, allied with clarity and creativity, that's what it'll bring you.
It's a great way to round up the conversation. It's been a really enlightening conversation today, Rama. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. And thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for listening to episode 4 of the TES Leading and Learning webinar series. Any of the links to get in touch with Rama to learn more about what he does will be in the notes that accompany this podcast. And I look forward to speaking to you again next month. And until then, have a great day.